I was his hairdresser, and I put these songs together on my computer through GarageBand, and I was singing on it, but I wasn't playing any instruments. I was just doing these loops and stuff. And he said, he was like, "You can you play bass?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, I'm sure I could. I've always wanted to play an instrument."
Yeah. I lay on the scale, you gotta glow, you gotta glow. She had my attention, she gotta know.
I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of the Let's Gather podcast. I'm your host Zeke, and in this episode I have Holly West to speak about her music career. Get more information about her by clicking the link in the description below. I'd like to give a content warning for language used in this episode and hope you have a nice day and enjoy the show. I'd like to welcome you to the podcast and thank you for joining. And you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Nice. So we can start with your introduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my name is Holly West, and I am the singer and bassist for Dead Groove Band. And I also tour with the well-known tribute band Zepparella. And so I'm a full-time musician. I also teach at School of Rock in Huntington Beach and do acoustic stuff. And
Nice.
that's what I do.
Great. So let's start from the beginning. So what kind of got you into music?
I've always wanted to play music, and I had a lot of family members that were musicians. My father's side were all artists and musicians. So growing up, I had a couple of great aunts and uncles that toured and had their own bands. And so that really inspired me to think that, that was kind of part of my lineage. And so I really took a liking to certain music when I was younger, and tried to emulate it, and tried to, learn the music, and I really enjoyed trying to play by ear when I was younger, even though wasn't very good. I was still singing and trying to play, whatever instrument I could get my hands on. And throughout my life, I didn't really understand music enough, and probably needed some better understanding of it, or better instructors to kind of guide me, because it's like learning a new language.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until later on that I actually picked up bass, and then really started understanding music, and started writing my own and playing in bands.
Got it. So was there any wavering in your love of music, or did you always just like steadfast, like I'm gonna do this for a living?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was really young that I started listening to like Whitney Houston, and I was just in love with, the idea of being a singer. And so for the sixth grade talent show, I wanted to sing "I Will Always Love You," and I forgot the tape at home, and so I feel like that was the start of my music career, and I didn't get to do that. So I always wanted to eventually, become a singer, and what comes with that is, also trying to become a musician,
Mhm.
because I mean, there's a lot of singers out there that don't know how to play an instrument, but I'm the type of personality where I like to do a lot of things on my own. And so trying to play an instrument to back that up was always a goal, and so I've learned many instruments. You can see I have a lot, so just a few over here.
So I tried to play instrument before because of school. It's kind of maybe hard, like the muscles. You have to train your fingers to like move a
Mhm.
certain way, and then you have to like stay at beating rhythm. How do you do that?
It's just a lot of practice. It's just all practice. The language is the theory, basically. And the language is audio, it's all, listening. And so you you kind of have to you kind of just have to listen. I tell my students when I'm teaching, like, learning music and playing music is 80% listening and 20% technique. So if you can, practice your techniques, and then really listen intently to a piece of music that you're learning, to get the feel for it, and to understand the phrasing, and to understand the structure, and things like that, then I think that's a good way to go about trying to learn a piece of music, or even trying to write a piece of music too. A lot of it has to do with feeling, and how to interpret the feeling of what you're feeling into the music.
Got it. About a couple weeks ago, my brother trying to teach me how to use a keyboard, and I was like, "This is this is different."
Yeah, it's really hard, and the keyboard is horizontal, right? So when we
Yeah,
look at theory, we look at all these different shapes horizontally, and when we look at like the guitar, for instance, it's more vertically, so you have these different shapes that go vertically, that can also go horizontally, but they're the same shape vertically. So it just depends on your poison. If you want something that you can learn very, very quickly, um, the guitar is probably easier than the piano, just because you have to learn these different shapes and they don't resonate the whole way through. So it's hard. It can be hard.
got it. And continuing with your journey, so what was kind of like the best part of your journey so far of music?
The best part of my journey,
Yeah.
I think, the traveling. I've always had a travel bug. When I was 21, I took off and worked on cruise ships and traveled to many, many countries. And I wasn't doing music back then. I was doing hair and working in the spa. And so I told myself that I wanted to go back and visit other countries that I haven't visited, or even states, with music. And so I really have actually done that a lot the last decade. So that I've been doing music, gone out of the country several times to play music, and then inside of the United States, I've actually covered a lot of ground too. There's only like a few states that I haven't visited and played at so far.
Nice. And what kind of been like some of the bad parts that you wish you could change from your journey?
Um, I think maybe like the stereotypes and the stigmatism, or like the just different parts of like having female bands, or being female fronted, or this different ways of thinking around the equality of just having a person go up there and show their talent and not have to look at them a certain way. um I applaud people like Billie Eilish, that don't show off their body first, they show off their talent. And I kind of want to be a representation for women that way too.
Mhm.
I don't really want my looks to come in between my talent. I want people to hear my talent first. And so I really like when I can express myself and just be accepted as a human.
Got it. Let the music speak for itself, and then not have other people's ideas or perceptions of who's making it
Yeah. Yeah,
influence.
and there's a lot of producers out there behind women that are taking their clothes off for, entertainment purposes. And I think it's degrading. And I think that we can be better as humans to, lift each other up and their music up in a better way.
Understandable. Makes sense.
Mm.
And so as you was learning the instruments, what was like the steps in terms of that? Just learning, just playing by ear, or going through theory first?
Yeah, it's hard because you're learning a new language, right? Are you bilingual in anything? Do you know Spanish or French or anything? Yeah,
No.
it's hard, right? And when we go through school, we even get in these classes that they make us learn these languages, we still don't learn them. So this language is the hardest part, right? The playing by ear also comes with a lot of practice. It's not like I can just pick up a guitar and play something, perfect. I wish I could. If I had like three wishes, that would be probably one of them. But and that takes a long time to be able to kind of pick things out by ear. I still struggle with that. I still have to look up tabs and stuff, and I'm getting better with that. But it's just, I
Mhm.
think it takes a long time, and it just depends on how your brain is too. There are a lot of people who are born, not a lot of people, but there's a small amount of people, I'll say, that are born with perfect pitch, and then there's a small amount of people that develop it when they're younger. But when you get older, you don't really have that sense of developing those skills. And So you have to have like a really good relative pitch. And so I try to work on my relative pitch, and I feel like the more that I'm connected with music and playing music, that it gets better and better. And I mean, I know some amazing players that don't have, perfect pitch. They have really good relative pitch. And so a lot of it is just picking up the instruments and playing them, and just getting used to playing with other people. I think the best advice I can give to someone, just technique wise, is just to play with as many people as possible. Play with people that are better than you too.
Definitely. And speaking of playing with people, how did you like meet the different bands that you work with now?
Yeah, it's always like, who you know. With Zepparella, I had put out a record, and put out a Zeppelin song, When the Levee Breaks, on that record. And then a few months later, got a phone call, asked if I was interested in joining Zepparella because they were losing their bass player. And so that was just, happened to be that I had the right thing out there for people to say, oh, connect me with, to connect me with Led Zeppelin, say, okay, she's into Led Zeppelin, but also the right person to say, oh, I know the guitar player and she's looking for a bass player. Let me, tell you about this, this bass player or whatnot. And so it's kind of like who you know, and what you kind of throw out there as your talent. And then with this band, Fred, the drummer, he and I started dating into 2020. And so we just eventually wanted to start a band together. So it just came out that, we got a guitar player, which is a friend of his from Peru that was working with him before. And so the dynamic in our band's kind of crazy because we live in Long Beach and the guitar player lives in Peru. And so when we do any type of recording, we go to Peru. But our upcoming tour will have a different guitar player in. And he's actually the guitar player that we're going to be using for our North America shows. He was in Megadeth a long time ago. His name's Jeff Young. And him and Fred play in a band called Kings of Thrash with David Ellefson from Megadeth. And so it's kind of like, we know him. Fred plays with him, so it's a lot of it's,
It was like perfect timing and putting yourself out there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the key. Right place at the right time, but also to be ready. And
Yeah. It's like, we need a bass. Do you know how to play bass? Yes. And he's like,
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
He's like, we need bass. You know how to play bass? No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how it goes. But sometimes when I got my first bass gig, the guy asked me, as I was doing his hair. I was his hairdresser, and I had put these songs together on my computer through GarageBand, and I was singing on it, but I wasn't playing any instruments. I was just doing these loops and stuff. And he said, he was like, can you play bass? I'm like, well, I mean, I'm sure I could. I've always wanted to play an instrument. I just haven't really. I've been playing my whole life, but never really resonated with anything. I only play a couple things, right? I can't really break out of the box. So he's like, well, I'll teach you how to play bass. So I said, okay. And then that's how I got into the gig. And there are a lot of people that do that, but for the higher gigs, the bigger gigs, it's usually, somebody that can already play.
Yeah.
This was just a local band.
That's funny. So how's it like managing time and song knowledge with two different bands? So do you ever get mixed up, like you play one song, that you might accidentally start playing a song?
No, I think when you get to when you get to a certain level where you kind of understand what you're doing, it is different. But to someone who doesn't know how to play an instrument, yeah, of course you would think that, like, how do you how do you register all of this? But like I said, it's like learning a new language, right? And so when you learn English and you grow up with English your whole life, you can speak different things in English. Like you could write a letter, you could write a professional letter versus like a letter to your grandma. Like it's a fluidity of the language, and so you get these patterns in your head. I don't know. So I'm good with patterns. So I think if you're good with patterns, it probably resonates pretty easily. If you're good with tone, if you're good at relative pitch, but it's all like little tools in your basket, when you're actually up there playing. And you know um one thing, like being not being a drummer, when the drummer comes in, I could usually tell what song it's going to be just by how they're coming in on the song. Of course I usually have my set list there,
Mhm.
but if I can't look at my set list, there's been times where I'm like, wait, what's coming up? And she hits, the cymbal or the hi-hat to go, oh, okay, this is the song. It's kind of intuitive that way too.
So it's like you hear it and then your brain is like, okay, like
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like that's how that song sounds. And you just like
Exactly.
somebody listens to a song and they can start rapping it or like we're singing it word for word because they heard it so many times.
Exactly. Yeah.
So with music, what kind of led you to the genre that you chose or you play right now?
Yeah, I that's a good question. I'm from the South. I live in LA now, but I'm from Dallas. And so in Dallas, and the South, I mean, they're very big on blues, country, and rock and roll. And I'm not so much into country, but I like, classic country. But like rock and roll and blues is definitely just something that I've always loved. I've always, enjoyed. I do like old pop music. I like old R&B music. I like real hip hop music, not, rap stuff that like this current stuff that's going. Not really into it. So I kind of enjoy all of those genres, and not that I'm putting all of those genres into my music currently, but they definitely still have influence, like on my melody writing or sometimes my riffs and stuff.
Got it. And when you're writing music, what does it feel like? Or when you're playing music, what does it feel?
What does it feel like? It's a great feeling. I mean, when you're writing something and it comes together how you want it in your head, it's great. If it comes out worse than what's in your head, it's awful. But and then it can become something else too. I mean, I think when you're working with people that you really respect and admire and love, that the music seems to just kind of come off well. And with my projects, I try to be as authentic as possible. My first record that I did, Mokita, I tried to come off as authentic as I could going into the rock and roll genre, the hard rock genre. And then in this band, Dead Groove, I also try to come off as authentic as I can, being in the hard rock genre, but also the influences that we've kind of picked out for the band. Before I do any record, I usually pick out a song list, like a track list that inspires me to write the music that's going to be on the record. And so I try to stay true to that, and I think it really comes out in the music too. So the feeling of being able to replicate, something that you're really feeling is great. And of course, when you get up on stage and you can play it and it comes out great, and the audience loves it, that's a great feeling, of course.
Got it. So do you like it's like an imagine it because like when I design, sometimes I can't explain what I'm just thinking of, but I have the feeling of the image in my head. But if somebody asks me like what to like describe it in words, I can't. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, yeah, because there's feelings, and there's also there's feel, and there's dynamics, and there's also phrasing that comes out whenever you're writing a piece of music. So all of those combined really kind of get that flow going. And so when you're building the piece of music and it's just flowing together perfectly, it's wonderful. But sometimes, yeah, you can't really communicate that. And in fact, in our band, the guitar player, he's from Peru and he doesn't speak much English, and I don't speak much Spanish. So the language, our personal language that we have, it doesn't really work. We have to communicate a lot through the music.
How does that work? Communicating to music.
Well, so Fred is bilingual, so he can interpret things, but he's not going to interpret things word for word. But I can sit down with Caesar, and Caesar can show me a riff, and I can repeat that riff because we know music, right?
Hmm.
But if he's saying, oh, if is he actually verbally explaining something to me, sometimes I have to play it out to actually get it. So yeah, it works really interesting. Like
Well,
the language.
never thought about it like that, but that makes sense.
Mm.
It's like you guys both know what you're playing, and then
Yeah,
it's
there's
like
technique that comes with it, you know.
nice. So let's continue to you teaching. How's that became about?
So I started teaching after, or well, during the pandemic, really. I have been teaching before when I lived in Dallas, but not to like, I didn't have like a line of students or anything. But when I came out here, I started teaching online, which has been great and really, helpful when we didn't have jobs, right? Um, but now I actually teach at School of Rock in Huntington Beach, and it's really great. They have a great program there. I teach anywhere from like 7 year olds to 70-year olds. Just anybody that wants to learn how to be in a band or play music or just get better at their own instrument. And every lesson's different, every kid is different, or student. And so I also do band directing over there. So that's been really good for me personally to kind of have that skill set as well, because when you're in a band, that's great. You can be a great musician, but if you don't know how to like really move the band along, I think that you're lacking a very important piece of the puzzle. There's got to be, a band director. There's got to be somebody that's in charge, at least to say, okay, and listening intently, So I feel like my skills as a just a musician has sharpened a lot from teaching, and I really enjoy teaching.
Nice. And you say like everybody's different, and they just said like from like 7 to 70. How's like that's like a weird different age range of.
Very, very different. Yeah. And I mean, I have, preteens, I have, elementary school, I have, adult students. And so the adult students, I think, really, it's a different mindset. The adult students are looking at the little tiny details and just making sure that they do everything perfect, which is great. But sometimes you want them to just let loose, right? And sometimes the kids are letting loose too much that you want them to just, do some of the little details. So, and you do see a difference in like the very, very small ones who really want to do it. They just soak it up like a sponge. I could teach them a riff and they'll come in the next time and they just play all the riffs that they know. So it's really cool to see them do that. And I've been able to, teach them theory from point A to point B, to where they come in, they don't know anything, and then point B they leave knowing as much as they really need to go start. They're either playing their own music or playing somebody else's music, so playing in a band. So it's really cool to see that growth in a musician. Give them a foundation.
Yeah, I remember in sixth grade we had to rotate between art, music, and theater to see which one we
Mhm.
picked. And the music teacher he put me on bass, and I was like, hmm.
Nice.
I was like, this is. Remember how my hands was trying to like just get used to that motion of where to go and where to place them.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people say, well, bass is easier than guitar, and it's really not at all. In fact, when I'm teaching bass, I get into theory faster with bass than I do with guitar. Because with guitar, I mean, once you know the names of the strings and the names of the frets, the guitar you go into shapes, and then with the bass you have to go into intervals, which I think are more they're harder than learning just the shapes, right, and the movable shapes. So yeah, it's a journey.
Nice. Before we continue, is there anything you want to state that I didn't act yet?
Yeah, I mean, we dropped the record for Dead Groove March 30th. It's out now, and then we'll have pre-sales for the record version, the physical record, at the end of this month. Everything that we are doing is on our website. We're actually doing a whole tour starting next month, all North America, and then we're going back to Peru at the end of the year. So most of the U.S. dates will be with Jeff Young, and until we get Caesar up here, because we're going through a paperwork thing. It's an immigration thing, you know. It's insane. So, anyways, hopefully that will get solved very soon. But and we'll have Caesar with us. But for the time being, we have Jeff, who's great, and he's done some shows with us already. And everybody seems to be welcoming him very well. But we're starting up in the Northeast. We're gonna go, and then we're gonna do like kind of the Midwest, and we'll do some West Coast and some South dates. So all until the end of the year. So you can go on the website and look for that, and then all of our socials are Dead Groove Band at Dead Groove Band.
Nice. And is there anything you want to ask before we, I guess, end or continue?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Nice.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for joining. That brings an episode of the Let's Get Podcast to a close. Again, you can find more information about Holly West by clicking the link in the description below. For next week, I have Hank Paul to speak about how to be inclusive. Hope you enjoy today, and I hope to see you there.